Okay, hello. Welcome to 24 Hours of PAS Summit Preview 2015. We're excited you could join us today for Paul Turley's session, Upgrade and Migration Planning, BI Features for SQL Server 2014 and 2016. This 24 Hours of PAS event consists of 24 consecutive live webcasts delivered by expert speakers from the PAS community. This session is a preview of one of the many technical sessions that will be recorded at PAS Summit in October this year. Recordings will be available in 1 week at www.24hoursofpas.com. My name is Scott McCormick. I'm a principal consultant at Pythian, and I have a few quick introduction slides before I hand over the reins to Paul. He will speak for 40 to 45 minutes, and then we'll move on to the Q&A where you can ask any questions you may have. If you have any questions or if you're experiencing any issues, just type your question into the question pane on the GoToWebinar control panel, and someone will assist you. Feel free to enter your questions in the Q&A field at any time. Once we get to the Q&A portion of the session, I'll read off your questions to the speaker. Since all attendees are muted, you will need to submit questions by typing in the Q&A field. Also, there will be a short evaluation at the end of the session. Your feedback is important to us, so please take a moment to complete it. It will appear in your web browser. 24 Hours of PAS would not be possible without the support and dedication of our sponsors. They are the reason this event is available to you free of charge. If you'd like to take a moment to thank our presenting sponsors, Microsoft, Dell Software, and Idera. In addition, I'd also like to thank the supporting sponsors for this event, HP, SQL Century, and Pyramid Analytics. Next, I'd like to bring to your attention to the upcoming PAS Summit, taking place in Seattle, Washington from October 27th to the 30th. PAS Summit 2015 will feature over 200 sessions with world-class SQL Server experts. Planned and presented by the SQL Server community for the SQL Server community, PAS Summit is single-handedly the largest gathering of SQL Server and BI professionals in the world. With over 5,000 registrants from all over the world, PAS Summit is also a great place to network and meet face-to-face with experts, peers, and MVPs. More importantly, PAS Summit delivers on providing you with the answers to your SQL Server issues, along with the knowledge, strategies, and skills you need to stay ahead of the curve. Save $200 right now by using the discount code 24HOP15 when you register. Optimize your savings by registering before the end of Sunday, September 20th. To find out more about the PAS Summit, visit www.passummit.com. Make sure you explore everything PAS has to offer data professionals. You can join local user groups around the world, virtual chapters, find free online resources through our Learning Center, and read up on the latest community news in the Connector newsletter. For those interested in business analytics, check out the PAS Business Analytics Conference happening in May next year. Visit www.pasbaconference.com for more information or to subscribe to our bi-weekly BA Insights newsletter. And now, please allow me to present the speaker of the hour, Paul Turley. Paul is a mentor with SolidQ and a Microsoft SQL Server MVP. He consults, writes, speaks, teaches, and blogs about business intelligence and reporting solutions, and works with companies around the world to visualize and deliver critical information to make informed business decisions. He's also a director of Oracle SQL PAS Chapter and User Group, the lead author of Professional SQL Server 2012 Reporting Services, and 13 other titles from ROCS, PACT, and Microsoft Press. So Paul, please go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you, Scott. Appreciate the opportunity and the privilege to talk to you today. The title of this presentation is Upgrading and Migrating BI Features, and specifically to SQL Server 2014. We're also going to talk a little bit about some of the features that are over the horizon a little bit in SQL Server 2016. So presentation's really kind of divided between migrating to a product that's currently in release. Also going to talk about SQL Server 2012 and 2014, and a lot of these slides in the same breath because they're so similar. And then I'm going to also talk a little bit about what's coming and what has been publicly announced and what we know is around the corner. This is a condensed version of the presentation that I'll be given as part of a full-day pre-conference session that'll be on Monday, October 26th. It's the week of PAS in Seattle. If you haven't attended the PAS Summit in the past, and you have the opportunity to do so this year, the PAS Summit is is a really unique event. It's a really unique community. It's more than just a bunch of people getting together to learn about a product that they build their careers on, but it's a community. It's a lot of old friends, to be quite honest, and they're people who work together and play together. And so I have the privilege of working with some of my peers at SolidQ to present a full-day pre-conference session on this topic. We're also presenting with Tim Chapman from Microsoft. He's a technology evangelist. Ron Talmadge, Richard Waymeyer, and Jim Miller. And we're going to be covering the entire spectrum of SQL Server product features, each of us kind of specializing in different areas. Jim and I, in particular, will be addressing BI components. And so the topics that I'm going to be covering in this very short, condensed version of that presentation are in the red box on the right. Analysis services multidimensional, analysis services tabular. I'll be talking about upgrading BI tools and managing BI projects, and then I'll also be focusing on one of my favorite tools, reporting services. What is outside the box, you'll need to either attend the pre-conference to talk about those things. We also did a series of recordings that are hosted in the Microsoft Virtual Academy, and you can get to that. It's essentially the same a lot of the same content as you see in Channel 9, some of the other recorded learning material from Microsoft. But again, that's in the Microsoft Virtual Academy, where we gave kind of a mini version of the pre-con, but it's a little more in-depth than what we do. Oh, and by the way, we will be serving bacon sharply at 8 a.m. at the beginning of our pre-conference, I think. I don't know whose idea that was, but just to get everybody to show up on time, I guess, and get everybody to wake up. So what does this presentation cover? So I'm going to be addressing SQL Server 2012 and 2014. 2014 is obviously the released version of SQL Server, and if you're in the process of upgrading, I'll assume that that's going to be your primary target. There weren't a lot of differences between the BI features in 2012 and 2014, so we can really kind of think of them as almost the same product. But there are a lot of great features that were added and matured in 2014, like column store indexes based on clustered indexes and that kind of thing that are really beneficial in a data warehouse design and maybe part of BI, but on the fringes a little bit. And then I'll be talking a little bit about publicly available information about SQL Server 2016, which of course is on the horizon. So really kind of the scope of this presentation is upgrading from 05, 2008, 2008 R2, and 2012 and 2014, and then thinking about upgrading to 2016. So, why upgrade? I wanted to make a very important point here, and that is that I'm a consultant, I'm a trainer, I architect solutions, I'm a technical person, I'm not a marketing or salesperson, so the purpose of this presentation is not to convince you to upgrade. I personally don't have any benefit from Microsoft for people upgrading other than to build BI projects on those upgraded solutions. But my purpose is to help you know what to expect when you do. Now that said, I want to make a very important statement, and that is that the reality is that at some point you must upgrade your database platform. You look at the history of SQL Server, if you were using version 4.2 or 6.0 or 6.5 or 7.0, there's a good chance that you're not using those versions of SQL Server anymore for a lot of reasons. And so if you're on version 2005, eventually you're going to have to move off of 2005 for a lot of reasons. So what's the reality of upgrading? Well, there's an impact and there's a cost. The impact may be training, it may be updating your skills. There's a tangible and physical cost associated with that. It's no secret that licensing costs go up. There are a lot of reasons for that, and it's not just because a vendor can raise the price and make more money. It costs them more to develop a bigger and more capable product, and they need to recoup those costs. So that's the reality of free market enterprise. The prices go up, and so licensing costs go up, and so we have both physical costs and some intangible costs associated with upgrading through each version of SQL Server. But the incremental cost to move from one version to the next is relatively low compared to skipping 4 versions and doing an upgrade every 5 or 6 years. So if you look at the relative impact in the chart on the left, it's a short hop. But if you're jumping from version 2005 to 2016, that's going to be a little more painful and a little more impactful. So I think the important point to be made here is that it's important to have a long-term plan. And don't let the salespeople and the marketing people convince you to jump to the newest version of a product. If it makes sense for your organization to skip versions, if it makes sense for you to upgrade every other version and stay one version behind, just so that the industry can test that and prove it out, so be it. But it's important that you have a master plan, you have a long-term roadmap, and that you stick with that, and that you maintain an upgrade cadence. I think of this as a freight train moving by, and this is the analogy that I have been using for years. As features are added and as things are happening in SQL Server, it can be overwhelming. In the end, the reason to upgrade is when the business value that you obtain from the upgrade exceeds the cost of the upgrade. Well, that makes sense, but there are some other motivators, like the end of life of the product. Sometime next year, Microsoft will begin rescinding support for SQL Server 2005, and you have to move forward. You just have to. Of course, there are a lot of improvements, a lot of great value that you can get from staying up with the latest version or semi-latest version of the product, and I don't think I need to enumerate that list. But there's a lot of value in staying current. And if you don't upgrade now, then when? And again, it gets back to that idea of having a roadmap, having a plan, and then sticking to that, maintaining an upgrade cadence. So let's talk about BI tools and get on topic. So when we think about business intelligence tools in the SQL Server stack, now there are a lot of related features and capabilities, but in the mainstream, this includes SQL Server Management Studio. That's a name that we've been using for a long time, but we've seen a lot of changes and seen a lot of improvements to that tool, but that's definitely a tool you use in BI projects. SQL Server Data Tools. This name change happened a couple versions ago, but that product has been redefined a little bit. I'm going to talk to that in a couple of slides. And then the products that are in the scope of this discussion, we could argue that there are some other capabilities and products that are outside this list, but Analysis Services Multidimensional, Analysis Services Tabular, which was introduced in 2012, Reporting Services, which is really the flagship mainstay operational reporting tool. It's going to be around for a long time, also a BI tool. And then I've included the Excel add-ins, namely Power Pivot, Power View, and the data mining add-in for Excel, because they're either very closely related to SQL Server in that they share technology. Power Pivot and Analysis Services Tabular really are the same technology. You can use the Excel add-in to author models and then publish them to Analysis Services, but that ecosystem continues to grow. And we see products like Power BI now, which really is kind of a growth out of the Excel add-ins as a separate product. And so this is the primary list of tools that I think about in terms of building BI solutions with SQL Server. We could add integration services to that list. It's just out of the box for this discussion simply because of time constraints. So this applies to all three of the product versions that I mentioned earlier. So SQL Server Data Tools for BI. The name of this tool has remained constant. However, the tool itself has changed, and it can be a little confusing. And the product team is kind of taking steps to simplify that as we move into 2016. But I want to explain what happened with this tool. So once upon a time, we had a set of templates that were installed with the Visual Studio shell that installed with the SQL Server client tools. And we called that the Business Intelligence Development Studio, or BIDS for short. Today, in SQL Server 2014, SQL Server Data Tools for BI is a separate add-in that you download and install specifically for either Visual Studio 2012, and the Visual Studio 2012 shell installs with SQL Server 2014, or for Visual Studio 2013. Now that's as of SQL Server 2014. If you're using a newer version of Visual Studio, the 2013 add-in will actually work with newer versions, and newer versions of Visual Studio will be supported into the future. So let's drill down into that a little bit. I mentioned that when you install SQL Server 2014, it installs the Visual Studio 2012 shell. There are actually two add-ins that you can download and install that integrate into either the Visual Studio shell that you installed with SQL Server or with a retail version of Visual Studio. And that is SQL Server Data Tools. Now, this has the same name as a tool that we had in SQL Server 2012, but it's not the same thing. That is an add-in that's used to manage database projects. It actually generates T-SQL code that you can manage in a project and then deploy and do version control and branching and merging and such with SQL Server. The code name for that tool long ago was DataDude. They decided to call that SSDT in this version. The replacement for BIDS, which is also the replacement for the prior tool that was called SSDT, is now called SSDT BI. All right, a little confusing, I know, but that's the reality of that. I'll speak to that a little bit more when we get into talking about SQL Server 2016. Things are going to be simplified a little bit. Let's talk about reporting services. So I started using reporting services before it was released in 2003. It's a great tool. It's been around a long time, and it's going to be around for a long time. There were rumors over the past couple of versions of SQL Server that reporting services was going away in lieu of Power BI and Power Pivot, Power View, and some other tools, and that's not true. Reporting services is here to stay. Very quickly, when reporting services was initially released, it was an add-in for SQL Server 2000. It was developed in 2003. It was released in the beginning of 2004. If you develop a report with reporting services for SQL Server 2000, that's going to create an XML document in the RDL 2003 specification. So that's what we call RDL 2003. When SQL Server 2005 was released, they updated the spec to RDL 2005. 2008, it's the 2008 spec. So all of that kind of marched in step, and all of the version names lined up for a while. And then they made some fairly significant enhancements to reporting services that made their way into SQL Server 2008 R2. Not a lot of enhancements to the relational engine, so they decided not to give SQL Server a big new name like 2010 or 2011, so they called it 2008 R2, but reporting services really got a pretty big update. The RDL specs, they actually defined a number of different RDL specs. So RDL, there was an RDL 2011, 2012, and 2013. We don't see a lot of evidence for that today, and fortunately it's not something that you typically need to deal with. However, if you're troubleshooting upgrade issues and you need to peek inside the RDL file, in the header you may see reference to these different RDL namespaces branded with these year numbers. So just important to know. I'll talk to the rest of the items on this slide and subsequent slides, so I'm going to move past that. I do just want to point out that in 2005 a tool called Report Builder 1.0 was released. That was supported in 2008, and it made its way onto the deprecation list in 2008 R2. The messaging from Microsoft has been stop using Report Builder 1.0 and the report models. It's going to be deprecated. It'll be replaced with other things. Later on, I'll tell you that that is completely unsupported today. So that's important to note. When you upgrade a SQL Server instance with reporting services, you have two options. And this is true of all of the SQL Server services. You can do an in-place upgrade or a side-by-side upgrade. An in-place upgrade is where I have an instance of, let's say, SQL Server 2005, and I'm going to install a newer version of SQL Server, let's say 2014, on top of that instance, and I'm going to choose the option to upgrade that instance. When I'm done, SQL Server 2005 won't exist anymore. Everything will be upgraded to 2014. So it's a riskier scenario on a production server than a side-by-side upgrade. I need to make sure that I've crossed all my T's and dotted all my I's, or got all my ducks in a row, or whatever analogy you want to use. But it's important to have a fallback plan. That fallback plan is going to be back up anything that I can't stand to lose. And in the case of reporting services, that would be my reporting services projects, all of my RDL files if they don't exist in projects, all my configuration files, essentially any file that ends with a config extension, the symmetric key for the server, and the catalog database, typically the report server, SQL Server database. When migrating from reporting services 2005, some things to specifically keep in mind. 2000 and 2005 sat on top of IIS. Subsequent versions of reporting services didn't use IIS, and so if you're migrating from 2005 to a newer version, know that you don't have to have IIS. That lowers your administrative overhead. It's actually a lighter weight service. The http.sys service was introduced in Windows Server 2003. It's actually just built into the operating system now. You don't have to set up a web server anymore. Reporting services will turn that on if it wasn't previously enabled, but there's really very little administrative overhead. You cannot upgrade across bitness platforms. In other words, if you have a 32-bit instance, you can't upgrade that to a 64-bit instance. So you would only be able to do a side-by-side upgrade if that's the case. And there's just no good reason to migrate to 32-bit. Servers should be 64-bit, and we'll see. Of course, 32-bit is, they've been talking about deprecating 32-bit for a long time, but apparently there are still some scenarios out there where it needs to be supported. So, Report Builder 1.0 reports are completely deprecated. Actually, they were deprecated as of 2012. They're no longer supported, not even installed in 2014. So your rollback plan for an in-place upgrade is to back up all of the config files. I got ahead of myself in the previous slide and I talked through this, but I'll just talk to it very quickly. Make a copy of all these config files. They're in different folders underneath the Program Files SQL Server folder structure. Essentially anything under reporting services that has a .config extension I would back up, and then anything under the Visual Studio folder structure that has a .config extension I would back up just in case. This doesn't happen very often. I've done a lot of upgrades, and for the most part, they're successful. So it's not a high-risk scenario, but as soon as we say that, then it's important to play it safe. Back up the report server database. The report server tempdb database doesn't really contain any persistent information. It's just more convenient if you back up both of those catalog databases and restore them together. And then back up the symmetric keys. If you don't have the symmetric key file to restore, the only thing that you're going to lose is password information, any sensitive data that was stored into that instance. And the worst case scenario is that you would need to go back and set up connections to your database and re-enter that information, but it's more convenient to have it. All right, I'm not going to talk through this slide, but some reference information for you on troubleshooting a failed in-place upgrade. I think that the point made here is that reporting services, like other SQL Server services, is well supported and well documented, and practically everything gets logged. And so during installation, every step is logged. Report execution, everything is logged, and then an upgrade, everything is logged. And if something fails, you can not only go to the standard Windows logs using the event viewer, but there are a number of log files that are buried in the SQL Server folder structure that can let you dig in and see where things fell apart. So again, some reference material here that could be helpful. I love the graphic on this slide. I actually took this picture when I visited Hyderabad, India, several years ago of all of the cables on a telephone pole, and it just, in my mind, it really kind of exemplifies what can go wrong when we don't have a plan. You know, when things aren't well laid out and executed, and that's you know how failed upgrades go. So, all right. So putting a cap on this topic, deprecated features in Reporting Services 2014. I mentioned Report Builder 1.0. Off the list. If you're using them, stop using them. A lot of the items on this list are really going to be important only if you've done custom development against reporting services. So namely, rendering extension device information. We haven't lost any capability. They've simply changed signatures and changed some of these parameters. So just know that there are some changes there. Only one method in the web service endpoint change, the get properties method, again, only important to developers. The RDL 2005 spec is deprecated. To that, if you have Reporting Services 2005 reports in a 2014 Reporting Services instance, in a report server, those reports will work. But it's just when you edit those reports, they'll be updated to at least 2008. So it's not important to go modify and update all those reports if they're 2005. They'll still work, but they'll be upgraded if you edit them. This is important. I have a number of clients who are still using the old Excel rendering extension because it has some capabilities supposedly that the new one doesn't have. It's on the deprecation list. So both the Word and Excel 2003, that's the doc and the XLS file format. Those rendering extensions are installed with the product today. It's easy to enable them, but they're on the official deprecation list. So just know that sometime in the future, they won't be supported anymore. Again, custom development, creating custom report items in 2005, no longer supported. Snapshot's changed a little bit. The functionality is still there. And the web service endpoints have changed names. So again, only in projects where developers have done custom work against reporting services is that going to be important. They'll need to change those references. All right, in the interest of time, I'm not going to talk through the summary slide. It's essentially everything that I just talked about, and this will be good reference material if you download the deck. So let's move ahead. I'm going to take some time and talk through all of this information. Just kidding. Again, this just makes the point that reporting services is really well supported and well documented. There's just a lot of good documentation, a lot of good resources out there. This is for your reference. Download the deck. You can use these links. All right, let's talk about 2016. So there's not a lot to show right now. The current publicly available community technical preview is version 2.3. If you're interested, you can download and install that today. You're not going to see much in reporting services yet. There's not a whole lot to visually show. I'm going to look at it. We're going to look at it together, but just nothing really sexy to see so far. What to expect very soon is a reboot of the parameter user experience. So you will have the ability to control the way that parameters are laid out in the toolbar. You'll be able to control different, the kind of that whole user experience. And we don't have a whole lot of information on exactly what that means, but in meetings with members of the product team, I'm told that that's going to be a significant change. Some new charts, I'll show you that given time. This is a feature I'm actually pretty excited about, modern themes. We've been asking for styling in reporting services for a long time, the ability to design a report and then to be able to style it, to be able to say, you know, I want to apply a style sheet to it, I want to change colors and fonts and whatnot. And we're told that we're going to have that capability. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but the product team is listening, and we're going to kind of get some love in this next version. Report Builder's updated a little bit. It'll look a little bit more like an Office 2016 application. And the HTML renderer has been updated. So we have support for what we're calling modern browser rendering. And so it's going to emit HTML5. That doesn't mean that you're going to get a lot of rollover effects and a lot of, you know, real sexy interaction with reports, but it does mean that you'll have a consistent experience across different browsers. And it also means that they're not going to put a lot of time into writing conditional backward compatibility support. So if you're using a browser prior to IE10, your reports may not render. So it's important to update. But across Safari, across Chrome, you know, on tablet devices, you can expect a consistent rendering experience. So let's take a quick look. And I'm in uber quick mode here, and jump over to my demo box. So I actually have 3 different versions of reporting services installed on this machine. I have 2005. I'm pointing to Management Studio as if I'm expecting it to show me something unique, but I have 2005, 2008 R2, and 2014 installed. So let's start with looking at Report Manager. Let me go back. I was kind of rehearsing this earlier, and I navigated to my report. So this is the 2005 Report Manager experience. There you can see, you know, very rudimentary kind of menuing experience. There's no hover over effects or menus here at all. If I click on a report, it renders the report. I see the toolbar. So if you've used reporting services 2000 or 2005, that's probably the experience that you're used to seeing. As of 2008 and forward, this was the experience. So if you hover over the folder, you see this drop-down menu, and it really hasn't changed since 2008, but things are a little bit different. And that if I navigate to a report, then I'm not going to see anything different here, but it'll be the report runs. Another upgrade that we saw as of 2008 R2, I think that's right, is that on the menu we can edit the report in Report Builder. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a project upgrade. To do that, I'm going to jump out to a folder. And here I have, this was the examples from one of the chapters in our Roxpress book, and I think this was from the 2005 book. So I'm going to right-click on this solution file, and rather than opening that with the bids for 2005, I'm going to open it in Visual Studio 2013. So when I do that, the project upgrade wizard tells me that this is going to perform a one-way upgrade, and it's going to do it in place. So it's probably a good idea to back up this project before I do this, but it's going to say we're going to do a one-way upgrade of the project. So the solution of the project will get new metadata, and then you'll have the option of converting each of the reports. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and of course I get that warning. And it says that that needs to be upgraded as well, so we're going to do that. So here's my project upgrade report that just tells me that the project itself was upgraded. So I'm going to put that away. Now, if I open this report and view the code, I want to point out that each of the reports in my project have actually not been upgraded. That's because Reporting Services has backward compatibility. I sat with a member of the product team who explained this to me. They said, you know, if you've developed reports with 2005 and they're working, we want to leave well enough alone and not mess with those reports. There's no reason to upgrade those reports if they're working. We're going to provide backward compatibility within the engine and within the rendering extensions to be able to read those RDL files and to be able to render them appropriately. So only when you choose to modify this report is it going to be upgraded. So there's the RDL version right there. So let me go ahead and modify this report. Open that in the designer. Just take this, get some things out of the way here. How about closing some things? There we go. All right. Just move this table down to make some room. And all I'm really going to do is put a text box on here. So go to the toolbox, drag and drop a text box, and we'll just say modified. Okay. And I'm actually going to jump out to a copy of that report that I had saved previously. So if I deploy this out to my server and then pull that down from the server, I can now open this in an editor and we'll see that this was upgraded to the 2005 specification. So even though I'm modifying the report with 2014, it's only going to be updated to the lowest supported version of the RDL specification. And this is normal. If I were to add a spark line or add a KPI indicator to the report, we would see it bumped up to a version that supports that functionality, but it's not going to be aggressively upgraded to the latest version, and that's by design, and it provides a little bit of a safety net. Okay, so that's the project upgrade experience. It's not sexy, and it's simple. It just works, and my experience has generally been that this is what we can expect. It's kind of like taking a flight across the country. You know, if it was uneventful, that's a good thing. All right, so I'll do a quick demonstration of the 2016 experience here after I walk through some more slides. I can see that in the interest of time, I'm going to have to move pretty quickly, so I'm going to jump ahead. I was really challenged with preparing these slides. There was so much that I wanted to include that I need to move pretty quickly. So analysis services multidimensional. It's had a long history, plateaued a little bit after 2008 as far as the features were concerned, but it's a well-supported product today. In 2014, we've seen performance upgrades. We've seen integration with SharePoint improved a little bit. We've seen some bugs fixed, but for the most part, it really is the same product as 2008. The upgrade scenario is really the same. You can do an in-place or a side-by-side. My experience has been that as long as you have a backup copy of your projects, and optionally you can back up the databases themselves, an in-place upgrade is pretty risk-free. Worst case scenario is that you uninstall the instance, install the old instance, and then restore your backup of the database or redeploy your project. It really is that simple. Analysis services is a fairly easy product to maintain and to back up and restore. There are some deprecated features in Analysis Services 2014. They mainly have to do with feature enhancements that have made these things unnecessary. I think some important things to call out are remote linked measure groups, dimensional write-back, and linked dimensions are no longer supported. You just use local linked measure groups, etc., and I'll leave this slide for reference for you. Some other discontinued functionality, really no capabilities removed, just specific implementations, some MDX functions, a data mining command, and then the create action statement in MDX was removed. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and skip that slide just to move ahead. Troubleshooting a failed upgrade. Again, everything is logged, both in the Windows event log and as well as in text-based logs that will be underneath the SQL Server folder structure. And again, well supported. And let's go ahead and, oops, let me jump back just a little bit. And I removed my summary slide there. So anyway, we also have, I'll make sure that this is included in the distributed copy of the deck, but we have a summary slide with some troubleshooting documentation as well. All right, improvements to expect in 2016. There were some performance improvements to the distinct count function specifically, and some improvements some performance improvements around unnatural and unbalanced hierarchies. We are going to see DBCC support, so essentially you'll have commands that you can use in Management Studio, in PowerShell, or at the console that can be used to manage cubes and databases, create and manage objects instead of scripting XMLA. So it's, I think that's a feature that's long overdue. And then we have support now for Netezza as a data source. So not a whole lot of enhancements to analysis services multidimensional, but I think this just shows that the product team is paying attention to it, and it's in maintenance mode. Tabular projects. I'm going to talk through this pretty quickly just in the interest of time, but if you haven't had experience with tabular analysis services projects yet and have done work with multidimensional, I would encourage you to take a strong look at Tabular. It's not at parity with multidimensional as far as the feature set is concerned in 2014 yet. By design, it's intended to be a simpler product, but it's a very, very robust product, and it's very, very fast. Performance is very good because everything is in memory. So it was introduced in 2012. It's based on the XVelocity in-memory analytic engine, formerly called Vertipack and Vertiscan. It uses column store compression. Column store was so cool that the relational team integrated it into the relational engine in 2012 and 2014. Calculations are defined using a newer language called DAX rather than MDX. It's more of a function-based language. It's a little Excel function-like. And it can be consumed as either a tabular or multidimensional model. What I mean by that is that any client tool that knows how to talk to a cube knows how to talk to a tabular model. In fact, it really doesn't matter. So I can point Excel at a tabular model, and as far as Excel is concerned, I'm talking to a cube. I browse the cube and use pivot tables just like I would against a cube. There is no upgrade path really to tabular. There's a good paper that actually, there are a couple good papers. There's a case study from Alberto Ferrari on using tabular with large-scale commercial solutions. It's a project I actually had the pleasure of spending a short time working on. But there's a good argument to be made for considering tabular in large-scale projects if the feature set meets your needs, and that's the big question. So I'll mention this slide and then reference the white paper in the lower right-hand corner. Choosing between tabular and multidimensional, the white paper is a few years old and things have marched forward a little bit at this point, but tabular is the product that the product team is really paying attention to, much more than multidimensional. And I really believe that that's the future of analysis services. I don't expect multidimensional to be sunsetted, or at least anytime soon. As long as it's in use, the product teams and leadership at Microsoft are going to pay attention to the industry, and they're going to maintain products that people want to use. But tabular is going to continue to really get more attention as far as adding features and improvements into the future. All right, and that Power Pivot for Excel I'll just mention as really kind of the same experience. It's a lighter weight version of Tabular, and there is an option to actually do your authoring in Power Pivot and then deploy to Analysis Services Tabular. All right, I know I had to talk through the slide. Actually, there's my my wrap-up slide for Analysis Services. So let's talk about what's coming in Tabular, and then I'll do a real quick demonstration of some features in 2016. This is what is on the horizon. So there's a whole score of new DAX functions currently available in Power BI, will be available in Power Pivot in Excel 2016, and then we'll see the same set of new DAX functions, a lot of new statistical functions, a lot of simplification over some things that we've had to work a little hard at in the older versions of SSAS Tabular and Power Pivot. Those will be part of the deployed feature set in SQL Server 2016. They're introducing variables, which means that you'll be able to create DAX formulas that are a little more programmatic, where you can save values into variables in one function and then reference that value in another function. Parallel partition processing will make it a little easier to maintain your published models. This is not a performance improvement in browsing the model because all that data sits in memory, but it is a performance improvement when you're processing your models, and it's been a little bit of a bottleneck in the current versions of Analysis Services. SQL Server Profiler has really been the go-to tool for performance tuning and performance monitoring in the past. It's a bit dated, and it's going to be sunsetted sometime in the future. In preparation for that, we have this new set of event management called X events, and we're going to have support for X events in the future. And then direct query is also being updated. It was a feature that was touted quite a bit when SQL Server 2012 was released, but turned out to be very limiting, and so you will actually be able to directly read data through a tabular model from your data sources without actually reading and staging that data. It'll actually run queries live against the data source. Many-to-many support. I'm pretty excited about this. This has been a bit of a gap, I think, in the difference between tabular and multidimensional. But the short version of this long story is that we will have much the same functionality that we have in multidimensional, and the ability to navigate through bridge tables and manage many-to-many relationships. And then we can actually manage the directionality and the cardinality of relationships. That's pretty cool stuff. Time intelligence, the tool will generate date dimension tables on the fly, and you'll be able to declaratively, if that's a word, create your own time intelligence tables or date dimension tables without actually storing data. It's all done programmatically. Query performance improvements, and then rather than using XMLA, there is a new object model and a data definition language that is being introduced. This is instrumental in improving the development experience. If you created large tabular models, you know that the development experience can be a bit challenging, this is part of improving that experience for more complex models. SQL Server data tools in 2016 are being the SSDT, which is the database designer, and SSTTBI are now combined into one tool that will once again be called SSDT, and so that simplifies things a little bit, and it will be shipped with the product, so you won't have to download and install it separately. And then we will have cross-compatibility with different Visual Studio versions, so you don't have to download a different version of SSDT for different versions of Visual Studio. All right, and I'm just going to mention DataZen. We don't have time to talk about it, but DataZen will actually ship with the product, and it'll be yet another reporting tool for mobile dashboard support. So I know that we're running a little bit late, so I'm just going to do a really quick demonstration. And so I'm going to jump over to another environment. This is a 2016 environment. Not anything really sexy to show here yet, but I will open this report up in Report Builder and just show briefly some enhancements that are being made to the product. So you can see that the CTP version of Report Builder is being opened. I've been talking nonstop and my throat's parched a little bit, so I'm going to take a half a second break here. So just the first thing to call out here is that you see kind of a modern look and feel. Functionally, in this CTP, I really haven't noticed any major changes in the functionality of Report Builder. It just looks a little more modern. It kind of has that new flat tile kind of feel that was introduced with Windows 8. Let's scoot that over. I guess I can't scoot that over a little bit. So I want to add a chart to this report. When I do that, you'll see that there's some new charts. There are two new charts. There are more chart types I understand coming, but we have a heat map or tree map chart and then a sunburst chart. So we can add that tree map. And you've seen this on other tools. This was recently added to the Power BI experience, soon to be added to the on-prem experience for Excel. So this works much like the other chart types that we've seen before, where you add your numeric aggregate value here, and then you group it by something. I just want to speed things up a little bit by doing a cooking show demo here, and I actually have a finished copy of that tree map down here. So let me pull that up to the top. This is really, really early right now. It doesn't even do color variation without adding an expression, but they've just given us a glimpse of what they're working on. So I'm going to run this, and I've actually used an expression to vary the colors in the different categories. Let me bring that back here. And so there you can see a tree map with tooltips in place. So, pretty simple visual, but a little more modern. Let me jump over to my actual report manager environment. Nothing's really changed here yet, and we're not quite ready to see the new parameter experience, but I will just point out that we're actually seeing this rendered in HTML5, and along with that is new browser support and kind of a more crisp experience. Again, it's a little anticlimactic because I'm simply seeing the report as it was designed to appear here. But if I were to view this in a Safari browser or Chrome, it would look exactly the same. And then just because this is a brand new feature, there is a compatibility mode right now. The first time you view a report, it'll actually pop up a little window here that says, this is a new visual experience, and let us know if you're having any problems with that. So know that I'm running a little bit tardy, so I'm going to jump back to my slides and wrap up here real quick. Oh, and good, that does bring us to the end. So with that, I'm going to pass this back to our moderator to help with questions, and then given the time that we have, I'll answer whatever questions that I can.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so anybody who has any questions, please type them into the chat and question box. We do have one right now. You said that the reports would be optimized for IE 10+. Is that I mean, Internet Explorer is obviously going away and being replaced by Edge, so is that going to be an Edge kind of thing moving forward?
Well, Edge is fully HTML5 compliant, and I can't speak to how Microsoft will sunset IE, but they have told us that there will be limited and then eventually no support for IE prior to version 10.
Okay. And it looks like it's a good thing we're running late. You've managed to explain everything so well that there have not been any questions.
Good.
That, so.
You know, so I will, since we have 2 minutes left, I'll go ahead and mention DataZen. I think that Microsoft acquired this product in April from Component Art, a product called DataZen that is really designed to deliver mobile dashboard reports. It is not a replacement for reporting services, and there's been a lot of questions and I think some confusion about the juxtaposition of reporting services and DataZen. DataZen is a great addition to the BI and reporting stack. It's available only to enterprise customers, so if you have any version of SQL Server 2008 or after, and you have enterprise licensing, then you can actually use DataZen today. But it's not a tool to replace reporting services, and a lot of things that you'll want to continue to use reporting services for. But what you don't need to use reporting services for is to try to pound a report into the shape of a mobile dashboard to view on an iPad or a phone, because that's really what DataZen is all about. And it's more interactive, and it runs as a client application rather than a server-side rendered report. There's an HTML rendering of DataZen, but I just wanted to call that out. That as I've worked with the product, I'm actually quite impressed with what they've done with DataZen, and I think it's a good fit. But it's important to understand that you need to use the right tool for the right requirements. So I think with that, we're ready to go to this slide. So Scott, I'll go ahead and let you talk through this.
Yeah. So everybody, if you enjoyed this session, please consider going to Paul's pre-conference session, which is going to be, like you mentioned, along with 4 or 5 other people, a massive blowout of this, as well as the general session talking about DataZen. Which you just
promise not to talk so fast when we have all day to talk about
it. And then the half-day session. So the pre-conference session, I would guess, is on Monday, and the half-day session on Tuesday. I'm not sure what the schedule is.
No, the half-day session is, I'm not looking at the schedule right now, but it's actually during the past summit. So it's okay. The half-day session is part of summit. It's not a pre-con. You don't pay extra for that one.
Okay. Well, definitely worthwhile. Power BI is pretty cool. And again, if you are signing up for SQL PAS, you can use that discount code 24HLP15. You've got until Sunday, I think, to get that pre-code done, or at least to get cheap entry. And then Paul Turley at Paul_Turley, and there's his WordPress blog as well. So.
Yeah. And you're welcome to reach out to me if you do have questions. You're welcome to reach out to me on my blog. The simple version of that is just SQLServerBIblog.com. And feel free to reach out with questions. And if you go to the PAS Summit, stop and say hi. So with that, I thank everyone for attending. Scott, I really appreciate your moderation, and it's been a privilege.
Yeah, no problem. I actually have a speech I have to give on the next couple slides here as well.
Oh, so. Go right ahead.
Thank you for attending. Upgraded migration planning BI features for SQL Server 2014 and 2016. I'd like to thank Paul for his time and his expertise. Again, I'd also like to thank our presenting sponsors, Microsoft, Idera, and Dell Software, and our supporting sponsors, Pyramid Analytics, SQL Sentry, and HP. I hope you enjoyed the session as much as I did. Follow along on social media with @PAS24HOP and share your thoughts on the event with hashtags. Hashtag PAS24HOP and hashtag SQLPAS. Stay tuned for our next session, Leadership Without Borders, Working with Global Teams with Mike Hilwick, happening in a few minutes.